Hi, everyone. My name is Brax Montier. I'm with UFLTV, and I'm here with Talon Greef. Talon, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, my name's Talon Greef. I'm a licensed clinical mental health therapist, and I've been working with kids in Utah for about 30 years.
That's wonderful. So I have a couple of questions for you. My first question is, you hear the term parental alienation used a lot in child custody disputes. Is there a formal definition of this term in the mental health profession?
I don't think so. So there's a lot of debate over what it is. I mean, I think there's a general agreement that it means we've got children that are unhappy with a parent, and we often call that parent the unfavored parent. I do, and then we have the favored parent, or the parent the children align with. Um, I would argue that it's parental alienation is on a scale. And so the way I see it is there's actually two factors for me for parental alienation. One is how hostile or antagonistic is the favored parent towards the unfavored parent. In other words, how much vitriol and poison are they, pushing into the kids to get them to be unhappy with the unfavored parent or to dislike them. But the second part is the vulnerability of the child who is being influenced, or who the favored parent is attempting to influence. So then you might have a child who is very gullible, and you have a parent, right, gullible, maybe trusting is a better word. But then you have a parent who doesn't have to do very much to get that child to be unhappy with the unfavored parent. Or you have an maybe older teenager who's had time with the unfavored parent, built a relationship with them, or may just have a personality that's more rigid or more independent. And then you can have that parent, spewing all kinds of poison, and that child just isn't really affected by it. And then you have, things in the middle where you've got a parent who's a little bit that way and a child who's a little bit more, listening to the favored parent. So to me, it's a continuum, and then it's really based, like I said, on two factors: the willingness of the child to be influenced, or the ability of the child to be influenced, and then the work that the favored parent does to alienate the other parent.
So you also hear the term estrangement, parental estrangement. How does that kind of differ from parental alienation?
So when I hear estrangement, we're the suggestion then is that with estrangement, that's more normal. That's a parent and a child whose relationship is on the rocks because of the behavior of either the parent or the child. When we're talking about family law, we're typically talking about the parent's behavior. And so you can have estrangement occur because maybe a dad just disappears for a while, and you've got a child who then is angry at the dad and says they don't want to have anything to do with them. But once you start to connect them together, then it resolves itself. So estrangement is you'd be just looking at the dynamics between the child and the unfavored parent versus the additional dynamic of parental alienation when we have the favored parent, also helping the child be unhappy with the unfavored parent, if that makes sense. So the dynamic is
Yeah.
simpler in a parental estrangement, and it's typically easier to address, much easier actually.
Okay. Um, how do you determine that parental alienation is occurring in a custody dispute? What are the markers
Uh,
that indicate it?
yeah, so you pick some really hard questions. I mean, questions that are really everybody's trying to figure out, frankly. Um, So how do you know? Well, there's one author who comes at it from a relationship perspective, the normal relationship bonding between a parent and a child, and that author says what you do is eliminate all of the barriers to a relationship that the unfavored parent might have in the way with the child. And that argument is, if you remove all the barriers and the alienation or the negativity continues, then it must be being fed by somebody outside of that child, maybe another parent or an older sibling. And so now we can start to say parental parental alienation is occurring. Um, the problem that I have when I work with families is I'll have parents that are really unlikable and they're terrible with teenagers. And then we have a teenager who doesn't want to visit with that parent. And then that parent says usually it's a dad, and they're saying, oh, it's the mom's fault. And really, I need to help this unlikable parent learn some skills so that they can build a relationship with their child. And I come from a theoretical approach called the teaching family model, which is a skills-based approach to addressing issues. And then I do in-home work. So I will actually go into the home and observe the child with the parent so that I can give them ideas, tips, tricks, coach them so that they can move those barriers aside. And I've actually that actually works pretty well, especially when you have a parent who's willing to make change and understands that there's a dynamic there that's interfering with their relationship with their child. But I always tell them, typically these dads, not always, but 4 out of 5 times it's these dads, I tell them, well, we've got to get rid of the obvious things first, and then we can start looking at these other things, and then it'll be easier to explain to the court why we think some type of parental alienation is occurring, or some kind of behavior that the other parent, the favored parent, is involved in that is interfering with the relationship between the unfavored parent and the child.
Okay. How often do you find that parental alienation occurs in a custody dispute? Or if they come to you, how often do you find parental alienation occurring?
So if it comes to me, we're at a level where things have gotten really bad, or we have a court system or a judge or a commissioner or a guardian ad litem who says, hey, we really want somebody to do some in-home work with this family. Because the work I do initially is pretty intensive, because we want to address the concerns by identifying what skills need to be taught, then working on those skills, and getting the parents to shift how they're interacting with the child. If it's a favored parent who's negative, or an unfavored parent who is kind of a butthead or difficult, not good with teenagers, or not good with little kids, help them shift. But then the nice thing is you can then withdraw, and then over time you don't have to be there as frequently. So you can get away from even a weekly visit, just by doing check-ins, to help when there are, when problems arise. So did that answer your question? I kind of got
Yeah,
lost in my time. Okay.
no, it seems to happen when they get to your kind of level. It seems to occur pretty frequently.
Yes, I
So,
can be more specific. I would say that when it gets to my level, we're looking at either estrangement, significant estrangement, or we've got, parental alienation that has occurred, in the sense that one parent is supporting a child's resistance to having a relationship with the other parent. So, yeah, by the time it gets to me, there's clearly a problem with one of those two. You wouldn't want to bring a specialist in if you're able to manage what's going on. I have come in on some cases, though, where I built relationships with professionals, and they like me to just work with the whole family. So there might already be somebody working with the child doing individual therapy, but you might have a guardian ad litem or a special master who is trying to manage the case, and they don't want to deal with the day-to-day issues that can come up between parents that are trying to figure out how to be divorced and how to care for their children, either collaboratively or at least in a way where they're not getting in the way of each other. And so then I'll get appointed sometimes in those cases as a family systems therapist. So in that case, the estrangement or the parental alienation may be a little bit in the past. Maybe a reunification therapist has already brought everybody together, but the child's visiting with both parents, but maybe we've got one parent who's afraid of how the other parent's going to treat the child. They're complaining a lot to the guardian ad litem. So then they might bring somebody like me in because I'll go check. I'll go to the home and actually look and see what's happening. So I would say that 100% of the cases it's occurring or it has occurred, and there's a concern about it occurring again.
Okay. In order for the therapy to be successful, what does somebody in the position of being the patient have to do? What do they have to actively work towards? I know you said that you go into the home, you offer some tips and tricks. Is it just employing these tips and tricks, or is it like a mindset that they need to come in with?
So yeah, I come from a more behavioral perspective. So the way I look at it is I can't really get into somebody's mind. I don't know what's going on up here, but I can look at their behavior, and I can see what they're trying, what they're willing to try, or what they're not willing to try. I can see, emotional states. Are they frustrated? Are they frustrated when I provide recommendations or suggestions? I think the most important demeanor I have to have, and what I told about a year and a half ago, I had a couple of dads, three of them actually, that got referred to me. And luckily their attorneys really helped me out because they told these dads, just do what he says, and you'll have a relationship with your child. So these attorneys had a lot of confidence in me. And so I had dads that were saying, I'll do whatever you say. And I even had them say, I disagree with that, but I said, I do whatever you say, so I'm going to try it. That's really all I want, because I believe that once I've taught a skill or a behavior, and once the parent sees that it works, they'll continue to use it. I think most of the time, dads really do, and moms that are unfavored, they really want a relationship with their kids. They just don't know how to get there. And so most of them, once I show them how to get there, they will make an effort to get there. Now, occasionally I get the parent, and it can be a mom or a dad, who feels alienated and they don't want to change. There's nothing wrong with them. And so they insist that the other parent has to change. And somehow they think that if the other parent changes, or if the other parent's punished by the court, or if the court issues an order, somehow a relationship between them and their child, somehow it'll improve. At least that's kind of what I think. I think part of that too is they just want to punish the other parent. They're really not interested in a relationship. They're just interested in punishing the other parent. So in those situations, that's when I'm willing to write a report to the judge, or report in court. Here's what I've tried to do for this parent. Here's why it's not. Here's what's happening. Here's why I think it might not be working. So I try to give the court the information, the data they need to make a good decision. But I also add my own perspective on it after I've given the specific things that I see that are going on that lead me to my conclusion. Because sometimes commissioners, judges, they might see things differently, and I want to give them space for that.
Wonderful. You talked about writing a report. I know in family law we have a thing called a custody evaluation. Do you work with custody evaluators a lot? Or is it you help them, or do you guys kind of work independently from each other?
So I actually do custody evaluations too. So if they're typically, what happens is I will, because the case before I come in, there's usually been a significant conflict, right? So the court tries different things to try to find solutions to that, or attorneys will work with their clients to try to find different remedies. One of the common ones is to get a custody evaluation. Which parent is the problem? What's going on in this house? What does a professional think should happen for parent time or for custody? And so they're hoping to get answers from that custody evaluation. So typically I'll come in after a custody evaluation. Sometimes they'll ask for somebody like me to come in as part of the custody evaluation. And then obviously I want to read the custody evaluation, see where the evaluator went, see what the concerns the evaluator had, or so that, because it gives you a lot of information that's really helpful. So typically I'll come in after an evaluation's already happened.
And is it easy to kind of fool a custody evaluator? Sometimes parents will kind of hide their grand plans or their master plans, and
Sure.
try to put up a false front. Is that something that you find often, or is that something that kind of slips by the custody evaluator that you catch? Or is this just something gets full stopped at the custody evaluator?
Well, so here's the thing. Everybody wants to look good, right? Especially
Yes.
when we're talking about our kids, so those
Yeah.
those for almost everybody, kids are the most important part of their lives, their children, right? So of course they want to look good. You know, I one of the scariest things I ever had happen once I used to work in child welfare before I got a master's degree, and so for a long time I was doing in-home work with a bachelor's degree and working with families. Um, Different, it's not considered clinical, but I remember talking to a therapist, and I said, "Well, you got to be careful with her because sometimes we're talking about a child. Sometimes she might." Exaggerate. I'm trying to be kind of polite. And the lady goes, "Oh, you mean lie?" She goes, "You know what? I can tell when kids lie to me." And I walked away and that scared the crap out of me. I was like, oh my gosh. So here's a lady who's worked with kids for 6 or 7 years, and she believes that she can tell every time when a child is lying to her. And so to think that professionals don't get fooled. I mean, any professional that thinks they cannot get fooled, they have already been fooled. It's very scary. So you have to always be careful when you're doing these. So what I tell parents is if I'm doing an evaluation or they say, hey, they're going to be good for you. So first of all, if I'm working with a family and maybe a mom says, well, that'll be nice when you're around, my first comment is, well, great. That's great. In a way, that's a short-term solution because if I'm around and then dad's nice, we'll take that. And well, eventually he'll start being mean. Perfect. Well, then eventually I'll get to the part where I'll see what's going on, and then I can say something to the court. Also with children, it's the same thing. They'll say, well, when you're here, the child won't be a problem. And I say the same thing. Well, one of the advantages then we have is that you won't have that problem that day I come over, or at least while I'm there. But the other part of this um, is it here. Okay, so let me give you the
Yeah.
metaphor I always use. All right, so I say if I put my hand on a wall and
Yeah.
I spray paint the area where my hand is, and then or somebody else's hand. Let's use somebody else's hand. I spray paint around it, then I pull the hand away and they pull their hand away. I come in later and look at that handprint. I may not see all the details of that hand, but I can tell it's got 5 fingers. I can tell how long they are. And there are other things I might be able to pull out of that kind of shadow or that image that's left behind. When I work with families, there are certain things that once you see them, you know that you can get a pretty good idea of how the interaction with the child, for example, has been. If I come in and I've got a child who's afraid of a parent, then I know something's happened that has created fear in the child. It may be the other parent, but it also may be the parent that's causing the favored parent might be scaring the child too. So as you come in, you're looking at the behavior. You may not get it perfectly, but if you've worked with kids and parents for a while, you start to get a sense for, like I said, you can tell kind of what the hand looks like, even though you're not looking directly, at the hand. So that's what I let parents know. And then again, if I start working with a parent, let's say I'm working with an unfavored parent to learn a skill, that parent uses the skill, but nothing changes with the child, then that tells me, one of my theories for what would fix the problem was wrong. So let's work on something else. Let's work on something else. And maybe if I run through all those, then I realize, okay, it's not this parent where the problem is. And that's when, like I said, I might look at the other parent or an older child that might be feeding negative information to the child. So, one of the ways you avoid getting fooled as a professional is you have to maintain your objectivity and you have to use the scientific method. You have to make a theory and then attempt to disprove it, not create a theory and then just find the evidence that supports your theory. That's really when things don't go well. Like I've evaluated custody evaluations for attorneys. They've asked me to look at them. And
Mhm.
and you can read an evaluation, and there are some things that jump out if an evaluator is biased. And so I think there are. And so then I pointed those out to attorneys. Well, if you're going to go after, here's the things you need to look at. I did a case a while ago where we had a custody evaluator who didn't follow AFCC guidelines at all, or good practical clinical practice guidelines. They didn't interview everybody. They were clearly only talking to people that supported mom. That was one of the things they did. They never talked to the other kids involved. And then there was a diagnosis that was never addressed in the custody evaluation that best practice would tell you need to address this if you're going to move a child from one parent to another parent, if you're considering a change of parent time. Like if you have autism, you've got a child who's very rigid. And so they may look really amenable, easygoing in the proper environment, but you put them in the wrong environment and they can be, those children who have autism can become violent and can start hurting themselves. And unfortunately, I've seen that too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you ever get the impression that the court might be dumping their problems with family dysfunction and divorce onto therapists? Or like, there's a problem here. I don't know what to do. So send them all to therapy, and at least I'll get credit for looking like I care. Or, it's a easy way to get a gold star to make it seem like I care. Do you ever get the impression from the court about that?
Yeah, so to me that's a negative outlook, and here's why. If you've got a good way to do something, let's say my car breaks down,
Mhm.
and I have a mechanic who always troubleshoots the car before they fix it, even if I tell them what's wrong. That's best practice. That's going to save you money in the long run. It's just, I think it's the same way with families. If the court tries a few things and then it doesn't work, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, we're not in our lane. Even a guardian ad litem, I laugh when I have a guardian ad litem that wants to diagnose kids because, I've reminded some guardian ad litems, I don't file motions and you don't diagnose kids. We have different jobs. Although I kid attorneys, they think they can do everything. And I get it, law school's hard. So maybe you can, but I don't think you can be a therapist. I really like the ones that acknowledge that, but then still give me their theory. But the point is, yeah, I think it's smart to bring a professional in who is not beholden to either parent. I don't think it's a good idea. And we have rules against one therapist seeing one client, talking to one parent, and then writing recommendations when they haven't been appointed, they haven't looked at everybody. And that's a common technique, by the way, that parents will do if they know they're divorcing, is hurry and get the kids into therapy, and we'll get a therapist that says the other parent, is bad. So not that kind of therapy, but when you grab somebody who has some experience working in family law, you grab somebody who, you can say, here's what I think is going on. But then they have enough trust in a therapist to look at the whole picture and then give them advice. I think in the long run, I think that produces the best result. Now that may be because I'm one of those therapists, so it benefits me, I guess, in that if I say that, I get a ton of work. But I will tell you, there's way too much work already. So if you're a therapist who wants to be busy, get into family law work. But I just think it's smart. Attorneys and judges and commissioners, they're great with the law, and they may have some great experience, but they haven't practiced working with kids or parents in the way that I have. And I can do things that an attorney can't do. I can go to one parent's home and see what's going on. And there are restrictions on what, the legal side can do. So you almost have to have some kind of component, mental health component, to come in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You also brought up that one of the common ways that parents who know they're divorcing, they try to get their kids into therapy to get them the therapist to recommend against the other parent. How often does something like that happen? Is that just a normal play that almost everyone does, or is that like only for the really high conflict stuff?
So I think it happens a lot. and I'm going to draw that conclusion based on the work I did before I really got heavily engaged in family law work. I think by the time I get to a case, a lot of those it has happened, but it's so far in the past, and that therapist, whoever it was, has been so debunked or so, ignored by the court system because of the inappropriateness of their what they tried to do, I think there are times I don't even hear about it. So, but before I was doing family law stuff, I worked with Division of Child and Family Services kids. I worked with foster parents. I worked with DJJS kids, juvenile justice children and families. And so, and then just hearing people, yeah, it seems like more, and I'm going to probably get in trouble, but more women than men do it. I've Probably 9 out of 10 are women, and maybe 1 out of 10 are men. I've had men also hurrying to get the kids into therapy because for whatever reason mom left. Typically, it's the parent who's left standing who will get the kids into therapy. And I do think sometimes they do it because they're concerned about the kids, but I think they get advice from friends, and I think they read the internet now. And I think that's, and they're thinking, hey, it won't hurt. And my kids are sad because this parent left. And so, but yeah, I think it happens pretty often.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit. You
Yeah.
said that you get put onto cases pretty often, or whenever you pick up a case, sometimes you're appointed. What does it take to become a court-approved therapist, to get on that list?
Yeah. So in the past, before I think it was this year, just this year, they've implemented some new rules. So before that occurred, really anybody could do it. You could do custody evaluations with a master's degree. Once you were a licensed therapist, you could get involved in the work. But the lawyers were really careful because if they bring in the wrong therapist, and there are a lot of therapists that don't want to do anything with the legal system because they've been involved and they think lawyers are mean, and lawyers are mean. If you're on the wrong
They
side,
they
they
are.
will have the temerity to suggest that you might be wrong. So when us therapists come out of our ivory castles knowing all and somebody dares challenge us, it can be pretty offensive to most therapists. And they get a little worried, especially if they don't have a good grounding for why they're making their recommendation, other than I feel like it's the right thing to do. Anyway, so it can be hard for them. But so now this year, though, they put some new things in place. So now you've got to get some education. You've got to get actually be supervised by somebody who's already done the work. I don't know all the details. To be frank, I haven't read them because I'm already good. I don't need to follow any of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've had different attorneys call me and say, hey, you're perfectly set up to do this. You've got this experience. You've got a best practice approach, and I, so that's where I've heard, some of these things. If I choose to help another therapist, I'll probably dig into those so that I can make sure I do it properly and
Yeah.
appropriately. Part of me thinks it's great that the state has done that. A bigger part of me, though, is sad because it increases the bar for therapists to become involved in family law work, and it may make it very hard now for us to get more therapists that are willing to do this kind of work. Because now they can't just try it; they've got to go through a process to be able to do it. But maybe I'm wrong. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And then one thing that's really important if you're going to do this work is being a member of AFCC, which is the oh man, something family conciliation courts. Anyway, it's an organization. I'm sorry, it's an organization that that is in the United States and some other countries. And the importance of it is it provides resources to people who do family law stuff, whether they're lawyers. and we all work together, lawyers, commissioners, judges, and therapists, to make sure that we educate each other about best practice in these family law cases because they're complicated. And the A is Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. So sorry, I just had one of those moments.
Yeah,
But
it happens.
there's tons of resources on that website, and it's like $150 or so to be a part of that organization. And that's usually the first question that used to be asked before a therapist was brought in on a case. Are they a member of AFCC? So it wasn't hard. You paid your money, you became a member, you accessed the resources. When I started doing this, roughly in the year, roughly 2000, when I decided to really get into it in 2005, the only way I could get training on this was by going to lawyers' legal training, their continuing ed training. So I actually went to family law training, lawyer family law training, to learn what's going on in these, and how can I help and figure out my role based on what I was taught. So so now having these resources right there, it's so nice because it's easy to go to them, it's easy to look through them, and then you can find what is best practice for a custody evaluation. How do I do custody evaluations? What do I need to look out for when I do a case where parental alienation is alleged? What should a parenting plan look like? A lot of that stuff is right there, and you don't have to search all over for it. It's really a nice resource for attorneys and therapists.
Oh, wonderful. That was all of my questions. Um, Thank you so much for letting me interview you. I know a lot of
Sure.
people have questions specifically about this subject because a lot of them have never had to go through something like this. And I mean, hopefully people don't have to go through this, but a lot of people unfortunately do. And so there isn't a lot of like resources out there for people who are divorced or divorcing or trying to like navigate their way through it. So I think this will help a lot of people.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but is it okay if I mean, people can call me if they want. I mean, it's not hard to find my phone number. I have this weird name, but my number is 801-577-0360. Feel free to call. If I'm busy, I won't pick up. But if I drive around to my appointments. So, and I have hands free, so I'm legal, but I'd rather talk than listen to the radio. So if people have questions, I don't mind answering them.
Okay. Well, thank you again.